respected dignitaries, faculty, and friends. A very fine good evening to each one of you. Today, I am entrusted with a heavy responsibility of introducing our guest of honor, Mr. Erik Solheim, to you. With a long and extensive career, he has worked in multiple spheres ranging from environment and development in government and international organizations to even fulfilling the role of a peace negotiator. Mr. Solheim was Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, between May 2016 and November 2018. Prior to joining UN Environment, Mr. Solheim was the chair of the Development Assistance Committee of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In this capacity, Mr. Solheim focused on the need to channel more aid to least developed countries and bring new members and partners to the Development Assistance Committee. From 2007 to 2012, Mr. Solheim held a combined portfolio of Norway's Minister of the Environment and International Development, and from 2005 to 2007, he served as Minister of International Development. This unique portfolio mixture allowed him to bring a coherent approach to development and the environment. Apart from his stints in the United Nations and the Norwegian government, Mr. Solheim is also an experienced peace negotiator, having acted as the main facilitator of the peace process in Sri Lanka from 1998 to 2005. The peace process led to a ceasefire and the Oslo Declaration in 2002, where parties welcomed a federal state in Sri Lanka. He continued to lead peace efforts in Sri Lanka as minister and has contributed to peace processes in Sudan, Nepal, Myanmar, and Burundi. Over the years, Mr. Solheim has received a number of awards for his work on climate and the environment, including United Nations Environment's Champions of the Earth Award, Time Magazine's Hero of the Environment, and an honorary doctorate from Terry University in Delhi, India. It is with great honor, pride, and privilege that I introduced him to you this fine evening. Looking forward to learning from you and having a great interactive session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm so pleased to be with this great group of young Indian thinkers. And when we think, there needs to be a dialogue, otherwise we cannot think. So I hope we can have a dialogue after my speech. I will speak for only 6 hours, and then we can have a dialogue afterwards. No, don't worry, I will be fairly short, and then we have a dialogue. The one photo you saw there was quite funny for me. That was, I think it was from Sudan, the thing out in the savannah there. That was a place called Darfur in Sudan, and we were there trying to speak to different groups there. There were some Muslim traders and some African people, and there were lots of conflicts there. And after a time, they decided to give me a goat as a gift. But what do you do with a goat when you're so far from home? It was very, very kind of them. So there was no way I could take the goat into the aircraft and bring it back home. So at the end, I gave it to the Rwandan peacekeepers who were also there. But I'm sorry to say, I'm not sure that the goat survived that night, because I think they had a barbecue from that goat. But today I will start by congratulating India, because what India has done this week is absolutely amazing to me. Electing a woman president is good. Very good. There are not so many countries with a woman president, but this is much bigger, because it's a woman president from the indigenous peoples in the state of Odisha, really coming from absolute grassroots up to this position. And look to how proud you can be. The two foremost positions in the land, in formal sense at least, Prime Minister Modi, his father and mothers, were they very rich? Were they very powerful? They were running a tea stall in a small city in the state of Gujarat. And this lady coming from indigenous group, I mean, in this nation where historically caste was so important and where powerful people very often could really trample upon the people at the grassroots, it's so fantastic to have these two leaders from backward caste coming up to show that everyone can make it. And maybe the next prime minister or president is in this room today. We do not know. I tell you, not one person who saw the president and when she was a young girl would have predicted she will be the president of India. No one. And this sets something very good for the rest of the world. I mean, let's be frank. Most presidents and most prime ministers are for sure men. Normally they come from the upper class. Very often their parents were rich and could send them to the best schools. Very often they come from the capital. Not always, not all this. There's nothing bad being rich and successful. But you need this, make sure that society is there for everyone. And that's what India has shown and proven this week. So be proud of being Indians. Then I will turn to the topic, which is Indian traditional heritage and environment. And I will give you I consider three main reasons why Indian heritage is so important, and three main directions for where we need to go now. First, why is Indian heritage so important? I mean, that is what is in the Vedas, and the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, and all these very, very old stories and scripture, which was made 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. Number one, the old Indians venerated nature. The idea was always that man and nature was one. Women also for sure, but they used the term man. It was one. Like the ocean, it's one. It cannot be separated. And even more, Hinduism is the one and only religion where even animals were included as gods. I mean, what is Ganesh? Half elephant, half human, but for sure God. Was Hanuman, a monkey king, and God. So humanity and the animal kingdom, the nature, is really integrated in a way you do not see in most other thought systems. And this is a great gift to humanity because it shows that we need to put, for ourselves, for humanity, for animals, for everyone, we need to put Mother Earth front and center in what we do. We need to be much, much kinder to this one planet. Second, there's a saying in the old Vedas, the whole world is one family. It's not just the oneness about humans and nature, it's the oneness of humanity. We are one humanity. And in these critical times of the world, we need to understand that unless we work together, we will fail. We are one humanity. As a family, we can face any challenge. COVID, economic recovery after COVID, poverty, environment, whatever it is, wars and conflicts, if we have this attitude of being one humanity, we will succeed. In India, the nation which is quite often spoken negatively about is China. There's a lot of what I consider China bashing at the social medias in India. Forget that. Please look into what the Chinese have achieved. They have brought more people out of poverty at a shorter time than any other nation in history. In 1980, China was 177 on the list of nations rated in economy per capita. Now it's an upper middle income country, soon to be a rich country. There's not one single extreme poor person left in China, and they're rolling out electric batteries, electric cars, solar panels, electric trains at a speed no other nation in humanity has done. We should venerate and respect that. But of course, when I go to China, they are normally not so negative to India, but they are negative to the United States. Then I tell my Chinese friends, look to what the Americans have achieved. There are a lot to criticize in America for sure, like racism or abortion laws or whatever it may be. But again, the United States has been probably the most successful nation for the last 200 years in the world and contributed immensely to technology in the world. And then if you go to Europe, you can easily find a lot of people speaking negatively about India. But normally they have no knowledge about India. They haven't been here. They do not know the place. And say they denounce the Prime Minister on the slightest of pretext, as if the Prime Minister of India was something like Mr. Trump. It's nothing to do with that. But this is coming up from people with no knowledge. So we all need to respect each other, to look for what is good in other nations, not what we can criticize in other nations. Then we have the attitude of the old Indians. The whole world is one family, the unity of humans. And thirdly, Hinduism is the most tolerant of all religions. You can be a Hindu, but you can also take upon elements from any other religion, no doubt. Gandhiji said that you can be Hindu and atheist at the same time, because Hinduism is basically the historical tradition of the people of India, this part of the world, and it's not a set group of dogmas. There's a beautiful, beautiful saying in the old Indian text. It says, how did the universe and the earth be formed? Maybe it formed itself. Maybe the universe was created by the God Almighty. Only the good Almighty knows, or maybe he doesn't know. This seeking for truth, trying to establish something bigger truth. I just had a conversation with Sadhguru, which some of you may know, is a dear friend of mine, this spiritual leader from Tamil Nadu, who has just gone on this fantastic bike tour from London to Delhi and down to Coimbatore. I think he even passed through Bhopal, if I'm not mistaken, to save soil. But he is a great intellectual spiritual leader. I asked him, is India a secular nation or is India a religious nation? And he avoided the question and he said, India is a nation of seekers. We are seeking for the truth. Because if you go to one village, they have some gods. If you go to another village, they venerate some other versions of the same gods. And in a third village, there will be a third version of the same gods. And by the way, they speak different languages and different dialects, and they have different foods. So there is not one truth for everyone. And how can there be? He said, how can I be so big that I can understand everything? Universe is much bigger than me. The planet is much bigger than me. India is much bigger than me. Even my village is much bigger than me. How can I understand everything? I can't. So we should seek for the truth, move towards the truth, try to grab it, try to understand it, but then of course we need a dialogue. So these three, the veneration of nature, the oneness of nature, the oneness of humanity, and this seeking for the truth but being tolerant to other views, that are three great takeaways from the old Indian traditions, which can lead us into the right decisions in the 21st century. What are then the right decisions in more practical terms? I think everyone here understands that we have a triple environment crisis, and I will not dig into that, just to say that climate change is a major threat to society, it's a major threat to India, and we need to keep temperatures down. We need to solve the pollution problem, and some particular northern Indian cities are very polluted. If you go to Delhi at the time when they burn all the agriculture products in Haryana and UP, it's a horribly polluted city, like in October, November. That must stop, and it can stop because we know the solutions to bringing down pollution. And the third environment problem, we are destroying nature at a very high speed, and again, we cannot wipe out different species and destroy ecosystems. So there's a triple crisis, but there is also a clear solution to these crises, because we have all the policies, all the finances, and all the technologies needed for these to be resolved. Of course, I'm in no doubt that young people in India will invent more. Technology will improve, for sure, as it has done over the last decades. But we have all the solutions already now. And look to how beneficial some of these solutions are. If you were in the old days in India, if you were the prime minister and you wanted to make sure that there were some money for a poor lady in Madhya Pradesh, what would you do? Well, you would normally send some money to the state of Madhya Pradesh, which will send some to the districts of Madhya Pradesh, which may send some money to the panchayat, which may give some money to that lady. If she was unlucky to be a low-caste person, maybe 10% would reach her. There will be someone taking something on the way through all this, and nothing would reach her. Now, when India is digitalized, where basically every Indian has a cell phone like you, they can go and look into the bank account, and Prime Minister Modi, the central government, can put the 1,000 rupees directly into the account of that lady and avoid all these middlemen and empower her, because when the money is hers, she doesn't need to go and beg for the money from someone else in the village who again have to get it from the higher level. It's empowering people. So that is the use of these enormous technological innovation for the good of the people, which is happening right now in India. I've just written an article about this, how other parts of the world can learn from this, because everyone has struggled to get the money to the poor. They're speaking about the poor. All leaders of the world speak about poor people, but they don't really get the money to the right persons, and that's happening now. So there will be innovations, but still we have the technology needed right now. And we need to do 3 things. Number 1, we need to be kinder to Mother Earth. Pure and simple. Respect it, treat it like our home, treat it like with our heart. Every human being is really a nature lover, and we need to make that attitude into society. I find it so good when the chief minister of this state is planting 1 tree every day. Not because these 365 trees he makes is changing the world, but the attitude it shows, the example it shows. That's leading by example. That's what Gandhiji says. You need to be the change you want to see in this world. And when he's planting trees, of course, he's inspiring the people of Madhya Pradesh to plant trees. And if 75 million people in Madhya Pradesh start planting trees in the village gardens, in the forests, in the urban areas like Indore or Bhopal, it has a huge difference. And that's how we change the world. This morning, we were at the Bodge Lake Exhibition Center for this Ramsar wetland site. And now it's only one wetland Ramsar site in Madhya Pradesh. But this year there will be 4. Because 3 other places will get the same recognition and the potential protection coming from that. These are just some steps, and of course it was hinted to by you that you have tigers roaming around here. Please be careful with tigers, because that's a dangerous animal. But it's also an enormous opportunity, because there are very few things attracting tourists as tigers. I have some good friends in Norway. I tell them there are a lot more to see in India. Even in my view, more interesting things to see in India, like cultural sites, temples. But no, we want to go and see the tigers. So this is also an economic opportunity to create value and jobs by keeping nature safe and good. And tigers, as you would know, was coming down to 1% of the previous level in 100 years. So an enormous amount of tigers roaming India 100 years ago. It came down to that. That now is coming up again. It's double in Nepal, it's double in India in the last 2 decades, and it's also increasing in both China and Russia and Bangladesh, which are the other tiger nations. So we can now safely say that if this continues, tigers are safe. But of course, we need more. But this is the first. Let's be kinder to Mother Earth, and let's be inspired by the Chief Minister's example of planting trees. Second, we need a circular economy. Why do we need all these plastics? I mean, we are all sinners here. We all tend to use plastic. But we can drink from a normal glass, from a normal cup. I was very inspired also, again, this setting the example, when Prime Minister Modi was at the beaches of Tamil Nadu, was meeting the Chinese President, Mr. Xi, at the beach resort in Tamil Nadu. But he spent one morning going to the beach and cleaning it. Again, he cannot clean personally all beaches in India, but he sets the example, shows all of us what we can do. We can keep Indian beaches clean, and of course, Indian riverbeds and lake beds like here in Madhya Pradesh. You don't have beaches, but you can keep that clean. and Madhya Pradesh has already some of the cleanest cities in India, in Indore and Bhopal. But let's get rid of all this single-use plastic we do not need. India has not prohibited many of them. Very, very, very good. Prime Minister Modi promised me that 4 years ago, but now has delivered. Fantastic. Let's make sure it happens in reality, and then let's go into recycling for all the other plastic products which we need but need to recycle. But the same as for plastic, it applies to clothing. We are throwing away basically every clothing we are now producing. It applies to the cellular phones that can be recycled, electronics. So we need to go into a recycling economy to be kinder to Mother Earth. And the third, we need to move into renewables. And that again is it's so good, because in the past, of course, if you went for renewables, you will lose money. There was no way to prosperity without coal. That's why people cling to coal. It's not because of evil, but if you wanted to get rich and bring everyone out of poverty, which they did mainly in Europe, America, Japan, and later in China, that was built upon coal. But now, solar is cheaper than coal everywhere. We just had a conversation today with the secretary, the chief bureaucrat for the panchayats in the state of Madhya Pradesh. It was absolutely clear. He said the decision is made. We will make sure that solar is taking off in every village in Madhya Pradesh, and solar will be used to pump the water and make sure that the water management is better, and it will be used for many other purposes, because now it's good economy to go solar. You save, I mean, everyone understands it's good for the planet, everyone understands it's good for our breathing and our health, but now it's even good for the economy. You save money by going solar. And that's why it will happen. And I can see news now coming from India every day of some place making a bid for solar, or setting up a solar farm, or some small entity making village-scale solar, or putting solar on a school, or big solar farms like you have in Madhya Pradesh, but also in other states like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So this is high speed, but we need to speed it up even further. And we need, of course, to add wind energy, green hydrogen, and many other energies. So I'm very optimistic. I think India now has all what is needed to be a global leader in the green revolution, not alone, but with Europe and with China and with others. But India has a very, very clear role to play, because it has a top-level leadership by the Prime Minister, and here in state of Madhya Pradesh, the Chief Minister, who really want to go green. Indian business like Reliance or Tata or whoever you want to go green. And you have many grassroots organizations and people asking for this change. So it will happen in the years to come. And these change can be inspired by these old sayings from the old Vedas, this great Indian tradition of venerating nature. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, sir. So now the floor is open for question and answer. I request students to raise their hands and ask the questions.
Tanuja, just I'll take 2 minutes. I just want to inform Erik that we have made our campus plastic free. So that's why you can see we use papers here, we don't do it. And even instead of this, we use this Milton bottles for our other purpose. Third is this campus gets around 40% of its solar energy. We have solar covered. Fourth is very good part, the students, this mess where they have their food. The food recycling is used for biogas making. So they have a biogas treatment plant. Food waste is put into that, and whatever the gas is generated is reused in the kitchen. So they are into practice of certain things which they do it. Plantation, recently they did the plantation work in this campus. So at least I can say students of these institutions are also working out on these examples.
Yes, students, now it's your turn.
Yeah, Sakin.
Good evening.
name is Mohit Parekh. So my question is that being a student of sustainability management, since from our very first class, we are exposed to debates of development versus environment. So having worked for years on both of these aspects, would you like to share any incident which you face, like any conflict between that? And what was the tipping factor which led to you take the final decision in that case?
No, I mean, absolutely, that was the perception in the past. And in the past it was also true, because you couldn't develop without major destruction of nature, and you couldn't develop without using coal and oil and gas. But the fact that solar is not cheaper makes this a completely different issue. You save money from the state budget, you make it cheaper for business, cheaper for individuals if you go solar. So that makes a new development model possible for the first time in human history. We can merge development and environment into one. And if you look to Prime Minister Modi, that's what he's doing. He's never speaking about this either development or environment. Of course, India needs to develop further. There are lots of poor people still in India and they need to come up to the middle class. There's no doubt about that. But now that can happen, as I said, say in the villages or the rural areas of Madhya Pradesh, it can happen based on solar. And then you create jobs and prosperity and better living for people. So it's no longer any choice between development and environment.
Thank you.
Greetings, sir. This is Gokul. I have a question. In context of sustainable development and green technology development, etc. There are lots of demands for grants and funding from various agencies, including United Nations organization. So some of these fundings, or maybe some of these fundings, might not be put into the perfect use, or maybe there are some discrepancies, and because of which many organizations which are actually working for Earth, actually working for betterment of Earth, are getting deprived or being entangled in this the so-called fraud category. People say all companies are fraud, despite them working very hard. So what might be the role of international organization, particularly the UNO or the UNEP here, since you have worked in? Because that hampers the efforts they put in.
This demand for great help from outside is mistaken. And the good news is that India is not doing that. India is not begging someone to come and help India to solve all the problems. India has the self-confidence to solve them themselves. But I'll give you one example to show how futile this is. At the climate talks in Glasgow last year, there was a big quarrel between developed and developing nations. It was about $20 billion US. 20 billion, remember that number. Seems to be a high number, $20 billion US dollars. That was the difference between what Hillary Clinton once promised on behalf of the developed nations and what they have delivered, 20 billion. 3 weeks after Glasgow, the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank of China, put forward a low carbon facility for China. That was 1,000 billion US dollars. So that is 1,000 billion for China alone, compared to this 20 billion they quarreled about in Glasgow. And then you will argue, well, this 1,000 billion is not for Africa. But of course, indirectly it is, because with this enormous amount of money in China, that's what's bringing down the prices on everything. It's China and India which has made solar available to the world. Yes, true, some patents happened initially in Germany or in California and Silicon Valley, no doubt about that. But bringing the production to this enormous scale, which has happened mainly in China, but also in India, brings down the price so that developing countries can finance their own development. And this is of course also why India is not asking anyone else to come and finance anything in India. I'll be even more brutal to the international community. A few years back I spoke to a great person called Mr. Fasaniev. He was the head of UN in India. He told me, he said, look Erik, the UN is using $400 million a year in India, and they are doing nothing which is of interest to the Indian government. Why is that? Because you are running a small project for women in Tamil Nadu, small environment project in Assam, small school project in Maharashtra. Well, if you are Prime Minister Modi, you need to set a policy for 800,000 villages. And that's of course why he has embarked upon programs like rural toilets. It's not a few in one village, it's nearly 100 million rural toilets all over India. The scale of this is enormous, and the only source of finance for this in reality is the hard work of the Indian people, the taxes paid to the Indian government, and the forces of the business in India itself, meaning again the Reliance and Adanis and Renews and all these companies. So your question is well taken, because this is what we are quarreling about in international talks. But India, fortunately, is now focusing on how it can develop by its own means, and that's what will be successful.
Good evening. So I would like to ask you, but first I'm quoting your words as you said that if we come together and work together, then there is no limit what we can achieve on this planet. So I would like to know your view on steady state economy. So do you think that our economic growth means because of our economic growth, our planet is in this precarious condition? Means we are on this condition that we have no planet B. So we have just this planet, and we are doing so much bad for this planet. So I want you to know about this.
The good news is, of course, that we know a lot about development, because we have seen some nations develop fast and some not develop. I give you one example which clarifies this. I mean, compare two nations, on one hand South Korea, and on the other hand Madagascar in Africa. If you go back to the 1950s, inhabitants in Madagascar were somewhat richer than inhabitants in South Korea. Now, the average inhabitant in South Korea is 300 times richer than the average inhabitant in Madagascar. 300 times richer than the grandparents were in the 1950s. I mean, going like that, South Korea has gone from one of the poorest to one of the richest nations in the world. 50 million people, so it matters. Madagascar, however, the average inhabitant is poorer than the grandparents were in the 1950s. I just saw a photo in, I think it was in Pune. That was the last rickshaw in Pune which was dragged by a human. That was prohibited in India, I think in the 1970s, and maybe in Kolkata in the 1980s. In Madagascar, shockingly, there was still a lot of rickshaws, and the man was the horse, not even a bicycle. And there were hundreds of beggars wherever I got, which you would have found in India in earlier days. So this enormous difference, no one predicted that in the 1950s, but South Korea has grown like that, and the environment is much better protected in South Korea because they have a proper, strong government, they have a strong civil society, they have all what is needed, and they have some of the most spectacular global companies. My family just bought an electric car. What did we choose? Hyundai from South Korea. And it has a range of 500 kilometers for every drive, this car. So one nation has been successful and the other not. Why? Three components. South Korea got the political leadership right. If you have poor, corrupt, incompetent leadership, it's very bad for any nation. And India is very fortunate in my view now. It has a very competent and very dynamic and really driving political leadership. Secondly, the economy must be market-based. Look to the basically disaster for India that it took into the 1990s when Manmohan Singh, to his credit, introduced a market economy in India. That delayed the development in India substantially because, like China, it was a statist economy and it doesn't work. So you need a market-based economy, which is South Korea, of course also India. And thirdly, a massive focus on education. Because I'm not aware of any very poor person on planet Earth who has a proper education. The very poor normally cannot read and write. If they can read and write, it's at the absolute basic level. None in this audience here is very, very poor because they are educated. So these three, good leadership, market-based economy, and focus on education is what's bringing development. But with that also comes much better ability to handle the environment problems. So I don't see environment and development as kind of competitive, but as one process, we need to do both.
Thank you.
Sorry. And by the way, if you are so lucky to be a young girl now born in Seoul in South Korea, life expectancy is 90 years. It's the highest in the world. I mean, look to that. I mean, in the past in India, average life expectancy was 30 years. That was the historical area. It was the same in China, same in Europe, everywhere. Now it's 90, and we'll soon pass 100. And that's so lucky, and better to be girl than boy, and much better to be born in South Korea than to be born in Madagascar.
Sir, good evening. My name is Nimish. Sir, I have a question to you. So, like the issues which are there currently in Europe and then the United Kingdom, basically related to the climate change. Like this fire is there in Spain, in the forest, and in United Kingdom also. So, as a Norway citizen and as a former minister for the Norway, and regarding the European nations, how would you suggest them for the improvement regarding the climate change to the UK government and to the other nations in the Europe?
The first good news is that there is now a very, very strong drive in Europe towards much better environment policies. This is led by the European Union, and it's happening for two reasons. Number one, the strong people's movement for environment, the strong students' demonstrations, and all this have really put pressure on the political leaders. Electoral victories by green parties in a number of nations. I mean, in Germany now, both the foreign minister and the economy minister are from the Green Party. This has made this happen. And secondly, the European Union is now seeing environment as the unifying force in Europe, which will bring all nations together under the leadership of the European Union. So the Union has decided on the so-called Green New Deal for Europe, the Green Taxonomy for Europe, which means that if you invest in solar and wind, you get a lower interest rate, more favorable treatment from government, and a lot of advantages. It's not prohibited to invest in, say, oil and gas, but you will have much more difficult circumstances for that, and this will drive investments into green. So I'm sure Europe will, with India and China, provide this leadership which we do need. But added, of course, there is a need for immediate action at the fires and the heat waves. That's heat wave is mainly, I mean, it's a problem for everyone, particularly hitting some old people. You need to find ways of protecting them. And of course, you need to stop fires and also adapt to and handle climate, and which Europe has not been prepared enough. Even if these nations are strong and rich, they haven't prepared enough, and they need to do better. But overall, Europe is now set to doing a lot of good on the environment front. Finally, I mean, you may ask what is the impact of the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine will supercharge this movement, because Europe wants to be independent of Russian fossil fuel. How can Europe be that? Based on European resources. What are the European resources? Well, the sun is European, because it's Indian. The wind is European. The hydropower is European. So going into all the renewables, Europe will be more independent of Russian oil and gas. India has a different policy. India is not boycotting Russia in the same way as Europe is doing, but the same is happening in India also, because the skyrocketing price on fossil fuel is a very, very strong reason for India to go green, because it sucks money out of the state budget, money which could be used for education, for health, for other much good purposes, and the more India move into the solar and wind, the more India save money, which otherwise they would have to pay to Russia or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or wherever you buy the oil and gas, maybe from Norway, I don't know, but you will get the resources kept here for good purposes in India.
We'll take last three questions, please.
Good evening, Mr. Erik. I am Pawan Kumar Simhadri, student of Sustainable Management at IIFM. as we all know that the Norway Climate and Forest Initiative was established in under your tenure, was greatly influenced the Red Plus program UN. Even after the 15 years of launch, Red Plus didn't deliver their service as expected. In your opinion, Red Plus is a success or failure, and what is the one aspect you would like to, if any, you would like to change in Red Plus?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for that, because this is very close to my heart. I believe this Red Plus, which is about protection of rainforest and sustainable use of forest, is a great success. But what you cannot guarantee against is incredibly horrible political leadership. When nations are so stupid to elect really horrible political leaders, it creates problems. And Brazil is the main case here. Brazil is the biggest rainforest nation in the world. We, from Norwegian side, supported them, and deforestation went on year by year. It was an amazing success. Brazil reduced deforestation with 80% over 10 years, because at that time, good political leadership, business and society was with them, and it came down to very, very low. But then, unfortunately, Brazil elected current president, Mr. Bolsonaro, which has increased the deforestation drastically in the Amazon by bad policies. He was not elected because the Brazilians wanted him to do that in the Amazon. He was elected because Brazilians thought he was a strong campaigner against corruption, and because he will create law and order in the land. And there is a much, much bigger problem with crime in Brazil than there is in India. So there were some understandable reasons why they elected him, but of course it was a huge mistake, and has created, and he was responsible for absolutely catastrophe of the COVID response in Brazil, which killed many, many, many hundreds of thousands of people. But it has also created this havoc in the Amazon. But Brazil has new elections for president, 2nd of October. While I'm a foreigner, so I should not have a view on Brazilian politics. I think in all likelihood the next president of Brazil will be Mr. Lula, who was president for 8 years in the past, an enormous success through those years. He's not old, but I think, and for sure, he will drastically reduce deforestation. But then look to the second biggest rainforest nation, which is Indonesia. There, for quite some time, there was no real reduction in deforestation. But in the last 5 years, it has been drastically reduced. And last year, there was zero deforestation in Indonesia. Not one tree was cut down in Indonesia. What an enormous success. How did it happen? Great policies from the Jokowi government, which is the current government in Indonesia. Again, shows the importance of political leadership. Secondly, all the big business in Indonesia, they don't want deforestation any longer. I'm working with a company called April. It's the biggest paper and pulp company in the world. Their policy is very clear: zero deforestation. No, absolutely no deforested area into their paper and pulp machines. They have even made a promise, which is very courageous, which is a one-to-one promise. They say that for every square meter of plantation they use for the paper machines, they will protect 1 square meter of rainforest. And the interesting thing is that the forest protected by this company is much better protected than the forest protected by the government. You would think otherwise, but the reason is simple. April, they have all the helicopters, all the fire brigades, all the resources to make sure that what they protect is very, very, very well protected. So the program was a success, and it has been recently an enormous success in Indonesia, thanks to Indonesian efforts. It was for very long a success in Brazil, but when the Brazilians elect such a poor president, deforestation unfortunately restarted in Brazil. And also in India, there is no guarantee against stupidity. If India replaces Prime Minister Modi with some stupid, authoritarian, terrible leader, there will be huge problems here as well, and same goes in my country, Norway. So please elect decent, far-thinking leaders.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, hello Eric, I'm myself Madhur. So I just wanted to ask that you come from Norway, and it's a group of it's come in the group of Scandinavian countries, and I have learned a lot. I have gained a lot of knowledge that Scandinavian countries follow a different type of model. I mean, there is free education for students, free healthcare facilities, and also in terms of climate indexes. I mean, in Europe, I think the Scandinavian countries are they are in the high rankings. So I just wanted to ask that, is that model not only for Norway and Sweden and different countries, is that model applicable to other countries also? Is it practical, and can that model take the lead in fighting against that climate?
A great question. I mean, obviously the Nordic countries are very small and much less diverse, much less complicated than India. So there are limits to how much you can use experience there. The combined population of all the Nordic countries is about a little bit more than 20 million. So again, a fourth something of the state of Madhya Pradesh is like one of the really small states of India. But I think there are some aspects which are interesting. The Nordic countries had very, very heavy political and class conflicts for very long. There were enormous amount of strikes. In Finland, they even had a civil war that was very, very brutal between the whites, which were kind of the upper and middle class, and the reds, which was the working class. It killed tens of thousands of people. So it was not like they were always peaceful. But at some point in the 1930s and the 1950s, the trade unions said, we will not go for revolution. We will go for reform, and we will negotiate. And the business leaders said, we need the workforce. We cannot create good business without our staff and our people. So let's start compromising and finding solutions together. That's the core of the Nordic model, that business and trade unions representing the working class and also for sure the white-collar workers, they find compromises together. We have much fewer strikes in Norway than in France. And in France, they start by striking and then they discuss afterwards. In Norway and the Nordic countries, we always discuss quite for some time to find a compromise. Only if we cannot find it, there will be a strike. So I think this attitude of working together can apply to some extent in India also. Of course, everyone understands that India needs business. And you need rich people like, say, Mr. Adani, Mr. Advani, Mr. Ambani, and many other tycoons of Indian business. They're most needed. But they also must understand that they need the staff and the people. They cannot prosper without them. I will give you one great example of a great Indian which I happened to meet the day before yesterday. That's a person called Cyrus Poonawalla. I will claim that he has saved more lives than probably any human being on planet Earth, because he had one policy, that was to make vaccines at large scale but at low price. There are any number of business leaders in the world who have made more money for themselves. What did they do? Produce low numbers of vaccines but for the rich people at a high price. Cyrus Poonawalla and the Serum Institute said, no, everyone needs a vaccine. And to get the price down, we must have large scale, large numbers, then we can get the vaccines for everyone. That's how we made the vaccines available for every Indian at COVID and other crises, and now also can export to the rest of the world. And again, this is this attitude that business is there for society. Cyrus Poonawalla is rich. He has a very nice house. He has some fashionable cars. It's not that he's suffering in any way, but he has focused on making vaccines for everyone. That attitude, and that's close to our Nordic model, that business be there for society, and let's work together.
That's the last question. This is the last question we are taking.
Good evening, sir. Very warm thank you from all of us for the wonderful insight. So we are talking about climate change, human capabilities, how to strengthen the changes and how to work for adaptation, mitigation. And there is still a lot of confusion if we should start from the top-bottom approach or the bottom-top approach. But isn't it an irony that after talking about everything, we still do not have some proper laws and international conventions regarding forest? Like as students of forest management, that's a curious question from our side.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the answer to this is very simple. It must be top-down and bottom-up. It cannot be either or. Without proper political leadership, you can get nowhere. And one nation which is very, very strong at the political leadership is, of course, China. And China is now dominating every single environment technology on planet Earth. I mean, the rest of us, Europe, India, we don't like to think of it, but it's true. 80% of all solar panels in the world last year were made in China. 60% of all solar energy in the world last year was produced in China. 80% of all hydropower in the world last year was produced in China. And 70% of all electric batteries. If you happen to buy a Tesla, you would think it's an American car. And true, it was developed in California. But also true, half of the value of this car is the battery, which in all likelihood is made in China. And the Chinese model is quite top-down. But its leadership of China is listening to the people, and that's why they're acting. But also the opposite is needed. You need bottom-up, because you need to put pressure on leaders, put pressure on business. If people don't want to buy the electric cars, no car maker can really make the electric cars at large scale. And if we are just throwing away plastics like that, we will not put the sufficient pressure on the plastic companies to act. So I don't see a choice between top-down and bottom-up. Then on international conventions, we have to make clear that we understand that on some areas we cannot act without international conventions. Give a couple of examples. Climate, without global agreements on climate, it's very hard to act, because there's no way you can keep temperature down just in India. India is not isolated. If China and the US and the rest of the world is not acting, it's not meaningful. Even stronger, the ozone layer. There's no way you can protect the ozone layer just above India. So we needed international agreements for that to happen. But say plastics, very different. There is a lot of work now on international convention on plastics. Yeah, I mean, it's good, but it's not the central thing. I have walked the beaches of Mumbai many times picking plastic. What I've never seen, never ever, is any piece of plastic with Chinese characters. Nor have I seen any bottle which I think came from the United States of America. 100% of the plastics of the beaches of Mumbai is made in India. Which means that it's completely meaningful for India to wipe out this, not asking if President Xi or Joe Biden is acting, because India can solve a problem for itself. Swachh Bharat, keep India clean, make India single-use plastic free. All these can happen without international agreements. On forest, yes, the international cooperation is useful. We need to, because we need a timber industry, so we need to certify timber to make sure that it comes from certified areas where it's acceptable to cut timber. So international agreements is needed. But the action I spoke about, say from Indonesia, that's happening because Indonesia makes the right rules for Indonesia, and Indonesian business make the right moves in Indonesia, and the people of Indonesia are supporting that, and they don't really need the international community for that to happen. So it's a mixture of what nations and businesses and individuals can do for themselves, and areas where we need international conventions.
So, thank you. You can carry on these discussions on, because Erik is on the LinkedIn and the Twitter. So surely his team, when you put a right question, his team will respond to it. So if you are interested, you can get connected and continue, because purpose of this such engagement is that get connected and continue. All problems cannot be solved here. But this is an opportunity to meet him, and in future you can always have the beautiful critical questions which are coming from you people, and can be asked to him, because he's an active international leader on environment as well as the political thinking. So you could see he has a political economy thinking also linked to it. So I will advise, please get connected, and in future when you are coming to India, please, and Madhya Pradesh, do look to us, and we are ready to host you.
I do my best to respond to everyone who writes to me, so I can make my email available and you can connect in different ways. And also please send the positive stories to me, because I believe in inspiring people. I do not believe in finger pointing and saying everything which is wrong, because that gives no solution. But if you send good positive stories of what's achieved in India, I'm very, very happy to put them out on social media. And I mean, in Europe, some people say that you are the press spokesman of BJP in Europe. Frankly, I tell them no. What I'm doing is getting positive stories from India. When President Modi, Prime Minister Modi is doing something good, I'm very, very happy to report that. But for sure, if Mr. Stalin, the leader of Tamil Nadu, is doing something good, I'm very happy to bring that forward also. He is in opposition to Prime Minister Modi, so I'm not BJP or Congress or CPM or Tamil Party, anything like that. I'm just trying to support India, and BJP happens at this point to be by far the strongest party in India.
Thank you so much, sir. And I believe this was a fruitful interaction between you and amongst the students. And I'm sure that we all are really inspired by your energy and your passion in traveling across the world and, working for the climate action and climate change. We, the IIFM students, are really very in-depth and gratitude to you for, coming so forward and sharing your insight on this. Thank you so much, sir. So we are moving ahead towards the end of the session. And yes, as I was mentioning, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. So with great happiness, I now request Professor Amitabh Pandey to give the memento to Erik sir. I also request Amitabh sir to present the memento to Ashutosh Singh Thakur. Yeah, sir.
Thank you.
And we do have memento from YTF team. I request Ashutosh sir to hand over the memento to Team Erik, Mr. Raj Mishra and Aman Yadav. Sir, you can just bring them over the stage. Aman Yadav. I now request Soumitra Marathe to share vote of thanks.
Hello everyone. Thanks though is a 6-letter word, but it is a telltale of a head that bows only in front of those who are worthy of his deference. It is with great honor that I stand here today to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of IIFM and C2EC3, Climate Change and Environment Core Competency Cell. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Erik Solheim for sparing some time out of his busy schedule for this event. Your words have been highly insightful, sir. I am sure they will inspire our young and emerging green leaders. I would like to extend our special thanks to Young Thinkers Forum, without whom this session would not have been possible. I would also like to thank the organizing team, faculty, and the supporting staff who have worked behind the curtains to make this event a real success. And huge thank you for the audience for their interest, energy, and enthusiasm. Thank you very much.
We have Mr. Erik to present a memento to IIFM. It's really so humble of you, sir, to do this honor to the IIFM. Thank you so much.
IIFM, you are student, you are also IIFM.
Team CTC.
Tanuja will receive it for IIFM.
Thank you. Before concluding, we have one more thing to do, that is a commemorative photograph to, yeah. So I request all the students to gather for a commemorative photograph.